Hello, and welcome back to Hope is Kindled. Today's episode is different. It may be the most important one we have ever done, not because of how polished or clever it might be, but because it goes to the heart of why this podcast exists at all. We are going to Middle-earth, to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, not just to admire the great sweep of Tolkien's mythology, but because sometimes stories are the only medicine we have left. This is an episode about healing. About finding hope when you feel there is none. About strength when you are hollowed out. About courage when despair feels heavier than any ring of power. But let me say this at the start. There is no way to do even one of these books justice in a single episode. Tolkien's world is too deep, too wide, too rich with meaning to be contained in a single telling. What we offer today is not a definitive word, but the first of what may be many episodes, reflections, meditations, and moments of basking in the extraordinary depth of Tolkien's imagination. This isn't simply a literary exercise. It is a journey inward, one I need right now. For me, it is a search for healing, courage, and the stubborn kind of hope that Tolkien believed was stronger than any shadow. These stories are more than fantasy, they are lifelines. And so we begin, knowing we cannot finish the work in one sitting, but grateful to walk even a little way along the road together. Tolkien begins, not with kings and wizards, but with Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit who never wanted an adventure. A comfortable life in Bag End, second breakfasts, doilies, and pipeweed were all he asked for. But Gandalf saw something hidden even Bilbo did not know was there: courage. Bilbo's story is a reminder that hope begins with small steps. Leaving the front door, even reluctantly, is the first act of bravery. Every great journey, every healing, begins with that trembling step forward. The lesson for today's purposes: you don't have to be ready. You don't have to feel brave. You just have to step. Jump Forward to the Fellowship of the Ring is one of literature's greatest portrayals of community. Men, elves, dwarves, hobbits, and a wizard, bound not by sameness, but by shared purpose. How often in life do we try to bear everything alone? Yet Tolkien reminds us that companionship multiplies courage. It is not Frodo alone who bears the ring, but Frodo with Sam, and Aragorn, and Gandalf, and Merry, and Pippin. Even when the fellowship breaks, the bonds they forged still sustain them. Compare this to Homer's Odyssey, where Odysseus longs for home but constantly loses companions. In contrast, Tolkien shows us that victory against despair cannot be won in isolation. We need each other. The Fellowship is a rebuke to the self-reliant myth Hemingway often portrays, men alone with their stoicism, like Santiago in The Old Man and the Sea. Even Santiago, though, dreams of his boy Manolin. Companionship, not loneliness, is what redeems endurance. And now we reach the heart of the tale. Not the battles of Helm's Deep or Pelennor Fields, but the slow, grinding march into Mordor. This is where Tolkien stops being an escapist fantasy and becomes one of the truest portraits of despair ever written. The quest does not remain whole. Gandalf falls. Boromir falls. The company scatters. Frodo shoulders his burden alone. Just as in Kafka's Metamorphosis, where Gregor Samsa wakes to find himself alienated and alone, Tolkien forces us to confront the reality that life is not a single, unified adventure. It fractures. It isolates. It asks us to go on even when we feel abandoned. Yet here shines Samwise Gamgee, the gardener, the friend, the one who refuses to let Frodo go alone. Sam is the truest embodiment of hope in all of Tolkien's world. He carries Frodo when Frodo cannot walk. He bears the ring when Frodo cannot. He reminds us that courage is not a dramatic battle cry, but the stubborn act of putting one foot forward. Sam is Tolkien's rebuke to Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Where Kurtz falls into despair and corruption when isolated, Sam endures by anchoring himself to love. Then comes Gollum, the embodiment of obsession and despair. He is what happens when we are consumed by our fixations, when thought becomes compulsion and memory turns to a prison. Gollum is not simply evil, he is what remains when hope has been chewed away by endless rumination. He circles the same thoughts over and over: the precious, the loss, the betrayal, the hunger, until nothing else remains of his soul. We've seen this before in our journeys together. Gollum's whisper echoes Captain Ahab's roar from Moby Dick, Heathcliff's anguish in Wuthering Heights, Ivan Karamazov's fevered reasoning in The Brothers Karamazov. Each is trapped within a single loop of thought, a fixation that promises control but delivers only ruin. Ahab's white whale, Heathcliff's revenge, Ivan's rebellion against a god he cannot reconcile. These men, like Gollum, are consumed not by the world, but by the storm within. Rumination always begins with a wound, something done to us or taken from us. But when we keep turning it over and over in our minds, trying to make it yield meaning or justice, the wound festers. It becomes the precious. We begin to feed it, and it feeds on us. Tolkien, like Melville and Dostoevsky before him, understood that the true battle is not out there, but inside. The One Ring is not just a symbol of power, it is the perfect metaphor for fixation, a thought we cannot let go of, even when we know it's destroying us. And then comes Frodo, not as a conqueror, but as a mirror. When he looks at Gollum, he sees what he himself could become. That insight is Tolkien's moral genius. Frodo's pity for Gollum is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment when empathy breaks the loop, when he recognizes that the darkness in front of him is also within him, and chooses mercy anyway. Mercy becomes the key that saves Middle-earth. It's not Frodo's strength that wins the day, it's his willingness to understand, to forgive, to see another creature's torment and not turn away. That's what breaks the chain of fixation. Tolkien shows us that healing comes not through domination, but compassion, through releasing what has consumed us and allowing grace to do the work that willpower cannot. And perhaps that is the hardest, most hopeful lesson of all, that freedom begins the moment we stop feeding the precious. And then, when all seems lost, the courage to go on. Sam's speech, perhaps the most important passage in the entire legendarium.
It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow, even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going, because they were holding on to something, that there is some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. Important.
This is not naive. It is not childish. It is the most profound statement of hope in literature. Modern hope is not the absence of despair. It is the choice to walk alongside despair and still take the next step. This is Kafka's lesson too. Gregor Samsa never escapes his metamorphosis, but his family's story reveals how recognition itself can lead to change. This is Hemingway's lesson. Santiago endures, not because the sea is kind, but because meaning is found in endurance. This is Odysseus's lesson. Even after years of loss, he still rose toward home. And this is Tolkien's lesson. Hope is not victory. It is persistence. In the end, the ring is destroyed. Sauron falls. And yet Frodo is not healed. He returns to the Shire, but finds it scarred. He returns to his life, but cannot bear it. His wound is deeper than the flesh. This is Tolkien's most painful truth. Some wounds never fully heal. Frodo must sail into the West. And yet, even here, hope remains. The Grey Havens are not a defeat, but a promise that healing exists, even if it is beyond this world. This echoes Viktor Frankl's insight from man's search for meaning. Suffering cannot always be avoided, but it can be given meaning. Tolkien shows us that even if we cannot heal where we are, hope lies in the possibility of healing beyond our sight. Tolkien coined a word for the sudden turn toward joy, eucatastrophe. In the blackest moment, when all is lost, something unexpected breaks through. The eagles come. The ring falls. Joy erupts, not because despair was false, but because despair was not final. This is the heartbeat of Tolkien's faith, and perhaps the heartbeat of hope itself, that despair never gets the last word. Throughout his work, Tolkien shows again and again that the heroes aren't the ones without fear, but the ones who take one more step even when the burden is crushing them. Frodo keeps walking to Mordor even after he has no strength left. Sam lifts him and carries him, but Sam himself breaks down and cries too. Gandalf falls into darkness at Moria. Aragorn doubts. Eowyn despairs. Yet each one acts anyway. Courage isn't the absence of collapse, it's the decision to rise again. In The Lord of the Rings, no one is brave all the time. Even the strongest characters need moments of retreat, of tears, of stillness. Those moments don't erase their courage, they reveal it. And maybe that's the lesson for us too. You may feel shut down or wanting to give up, but you haven't. You're still walking, still showing up for your children, still writing, still searching for light. That's exactly the quiet, stubborn hope Tolkien believed was stronger than any shadow. So what do we learn, wandering through Mordor with Tolkien at our side today? Tolkien's stories have not remained locked in libraries or movie screens. They have walked into people's lives, into trenches, hospitals, prisons, and quiet rooms, and given hope when none seemed possible. They have certainly walked into mine. Here are real voices, real struggles, much like my own, and real moments where The Lord of the Rings became more than just a story. There have been seasons in my life when I turned to the voices in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit not as stories to pass the time, but as lifelines, when I needed something more than distraction, when I needed a light in the darkness. In those moments, Middle-earth became more than a world on the page, it became a refuge. When my own strength faltered, I looked to Gandalf's words about courage. I found that courage in the quiet persistence of Samwise, in the steadiness of Aragorn, in Frodo's weary determination to take one more step toward hope. Tolkien gave me not escape, but renewal. Though he never set out to write self-help, few works in literature have helped so many people heal. His stories remind us that brokenness is not the end of the road, it's where the real journey begins. Healing, in Tolkien's world, is never loud or miraculous, it's slow, relational, and rooted in love, friendship, and perseverance. In The Hobbit, Bilbo's adventure begins with fear. He leaves the comfort of home and discovers that courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it. Every step of his journey from the misty mountains to Smaug's lair teaches that transformation is earned through endurance. Bilbo's healing comes from realizing that comfort can become a cage, and that facing danger can restore a soul that has grown too safe. The book whispers to every reader who has lost confidence, "You are braver than you think, and the road will reveal it to you." In The Lord of the Rings, the idea deepens. Frodo's wound never fully heals, the ring's burden leaves a scar that time cannot erase. Yet through that wound comes wisdom, humility, and compassion. Tolkien shows that pain can be redemptive, that suffering can deepen empathy. True healing is not erasing what hurt us, but learning to live gently with it, to find meaning, as Viktor Frankl might say, in the endurance itself. Every major character mirrors a path to recovery. Middle-earth is, at heart, a landscape of recovery. And for us, readers, wanderers, and those who've known dark seasons, Tolkien's works provide a mirror. They tell us that healing begins with small choices, keeping faith, offering kindness, taking one more step. The journey through Middle-earth becomes a rehearsal for endurance in our own lives. When we close the book, the road goes on, but we carry its strength with us. The courage of hobbits, the wisdom of Gandalf, the mercy of Frodo, and the laughter that returns after tears. This is how The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings promote healing and inner strength. They remind us that even the smallest light can hold its own against the longest night, and that the act of walking through darkness together is itself a form of grace. Each of these lives, in its own way, reminds us that Tolkien's world was never only fantasy, it was a mirror held up to our own. The courage found in Mordor, the mercy offered to Gollum, the endurance of Samwise, they live in us too, whenever we keep moving through our own shadows. Hope is not a banner waved in sunlight. It is Sam's hand on Frodo's shoulder in the ash. It is pity for Gollum when he least deserves it. It is one step more when you are sure you cannot take another. When Hemingway shows us Santiago, battered but unbroken, when Kafka shows us Gregor, waking to alienation but still longing for love, when Conrad shows us the terror of darkness, when Homer shows us Odysseus rowing through storms, all of them whisper the same truth Tolkien shouts in Mordor. Hope is not fragile. It endures. And so we close with Sam's words, from the film adaptation of The Two Towers by Peter Jackson, which are worth repeating as Tolkien's gift of timeless wisdom to us.
There's some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for.
May those words carry you today, carry you tomorrow, and light your path when darkness presses hardest. That is what they do for me. Good journey.